He was pounding on my door at 7 in the morning in some cheap knockoff uniform, waving a badge that gleamed too bright under the porch light and resting his hand on the gun at his hip. I thought for a second my son was about to be shot in his own front yard. And when Will finally stepped forward, lifting his shirt to show his real federal badge, the whole street went dead silent, like the world had stopped breathing. That's how our so-called peaceful neighborhood introduced itself to me. I moved to Oak Ridge Estates after my wife died of cancer. I thought this place would be quiet, predictable, the kind of suburb where lawns are trimmed the same length and the loudest thing you hear is a sprinkler ticking at dawn. My son Will came with me on grief leave from the U.S. Marshals. He'd been shattered by losing his mom, and I thought maybe living somewhere calm would help him heal. I wanted to believe in picket fences and block parties, not chaos. But chaos was waiting for us right on our doorstep. His name was Brad Henderson. He showed up just 3 days after we finished unpacking, standing tall in some half-baked official get-up utility belt strapped around his waist, the bulge of a holstered pistol making my stomach tighten. He knocked like a man with authority, like he owned the block. "Government safety inspection," he barked, flashing that badge with a cheap gold shine that should have been my first clue. He claimed he had jurisdiction under some partnership with Homeland Security, rattled off words like compliance and federal housing standards. And when I hesitated, asked to see credentials, he slid his hand toward his gun and said, "Real slow. You sure you want to obstruct official business? Consequences can get messy." I froze. For a split second, I almost believed him. That's the thing about someone who acts like they're in charge, you start to doubt yourself. But Will came to stand beside me, quiet but alert, scanning every detail like only a marshal could. He didn't raise his voice. He just asked, "What agency issued your authority?" Brad flinched for half a heartbeat before doubling down on the lie. Then he slapped a $300 citation into my hand for inspection obstruction and walked off like he'd just served justice. The neighbors whispered their stories over fences like kids telling ghost tales. Donna said she'd been fined so many times she'd stopped planting flowers. Mrs. Patterson confessed Brad had threatened to report her to immigration enforcement, even though she was a U.S. citizen who'd lived here for decades. The Martinez family said their kids were too scared to ride bikes outside. Everyone looked over their shoulders when they talked like Brad was hiding in the hedges. And you know what chilled me? They all said the same thing. Nobody fights back anymore. That night I asked Will what he thought. He didn't look at me, just stared at that fake badge. Finally he said, "Dad, it's a fraud. The gun might be real, but nothing else about him is." He opened his laptop and started building a case file folder after folder. He wasn't supposed to be working. He was on leave to recover, but his training wouldn't let him walk away. He told me we couldn't just file a complaint. Brad had friends at the local station, people who looked the other way. If we wanted justice, we needed overwhelming evidence. Weeks passed and the harassment escalated. Brad issued new fines, always under codes I couldn't find in any law book. He started showing up at night, pounding on doors, raising his voice about federal safety audits. And he never came alone anymore. He'd drag along Tim, a nervous neighbor, or rope in Mrs. Patterson as a witness. He wanted to crowd pressure intimidation from all sides. It wasn't just about the gun anymore. It was about making us look like outsiders who refused to follow the rules. I'll admit it. One night I broke down. I told Will maybe we should just let it go. "We came here to heal," I said. "Maybe I was wrong to drag you into another fight. Maybe I'm just picking the wrong battles." I felt weak, ashamed, like I'd failed at being the father who promised his son peace. Will didn't even raise his voice. He just looked at me and said, "Dad, if we give in, he'll do this to every family. He's already winning because people are too scared to fight back. We can't be one of them." That was the moment I snapped out of it. Watching my son, still grieving but standing tall, reminded me who I was too. I wasn't just a tired old man. I used to be the guy neighbors called before they called the cops back when I worked investigations. I knew the look of a crook hiding behind paperwork. Brad might have had a gun, but we had the truth. So we documented everything. Will set up surveillance, mapped Brad's routes, cross-checked his bogus citations against federal records. Every one of his so-called laws came from revoked codes or imaginary agencies. The neighbors started quietly helping two photos recordings testimony. Piece by piece, the mask cracked. Brad wasn't just a bully with a badge, he was running organized fraud. Then came the breaking point. One afternoon, Brad stormed up with 3 men in tactical gear, Tim trailing behind, pale as a ghost. "This is a federal compliance audit," Brad barked. "Step outside." I walked out calmly, every nerve in my body screaming, but I kept my voice steady. "What's the problem, Officer Henderson?" I said, stressing officer just enough to make it sting. His face darkened. "You know exactly what the problem is," he spat, and his hand went straight to his gun. The street started filling with neighbors. Doors cracked open, phones came up to record. Brad saw the crowd, but didn't back down. He turned on Will, shouting, "You ask too many damn questions for someone who's supposed to cooperate. Show me your papers, or I'll arrest you myself." And then, in one reckless motion, he drew his gun and leveled it at my son's chest. Time froze. Mrs. Patterson gasped. Someone dropped their phone on the sidewalk with a loud crack. I truly thought I was about to watch my son die right there. But Will didn't flinch. He spoke calmly. "Lower your weapon. Everyone can see this." His voice carried steady, trained. Brad's face was red veins bulging. "Show me ID, or I'll arrest you for obstruction." And then Will moved. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled up his shirt, revealing his real badge, silver and gold, catching the afternoon sun. "Deputy U.S. Marshal Will Harris," he said, "and you just threatened a federal officer with a deadly weapon in front of multiple witnesses." The silence was deafening. Brad's eyes widened. His hand shook on the gun. He stammered, "Fake. That's fake." His voice cracked, desperate, pathetic. The sirens were already echoing down the street. Donna was whispering frantically into her phone, 911. Tim dropped his weapon and backed away with his hands up. The other men looked around like rats on a sinking ship. Neighbors who'd been silent for months started speaking out loud. Mrs. Patterson was crying, the Martinez kids peeked from behind their parents, and suddenly everyone was telling their stories in the open. The power Brad had over them evaporated the second they saw real authority standing firm in the sunlight. The police rolled in, confirmed Will's badge with federal dispatch, and the shift in power was instant. Brad went from neighborhood tyrant to federal suspect in under a minute. He was still sputtering, still insisting, "This is entrapment, I have protection," but his words meant nothing. The cuffs clicked shut around his wrists, and for the first time in months, I felt the air lift from my chest. That was the end of Brad Henderson. Not in a blaze of glory, but in a pathetic whimper exposed for what he truly was, a fraud with a gun and a cheap piece of metal brought down by his own arrogance. And here's the lesson I'll never forget. Fear only grows when you stay quiet, but the moment you stand up and speak out, the whole mask crumbles.